Once Upon a Time Tales, Puss in Boots. Adapted by Jane Jerrard, illustrated by Susan Spellman. Once upon a time, there was a poor country man who had raised 3 sons. When the man died, the 3 agreed to divide up the few things he owned. The oldest took his house, the middle son got his donkey, and the youngest son was left with only his father's cat. "What on earth will I do with a cat?" moaned the young man, for he could barely keep himself fed and had nothing to offer a pet. The cat overheard him and answered, "Don't worry, master. If you give me a sack and a pair of boots, you'll find that you have the most valuable thing your father ever owned." The cat put on the old pair of boots and took the sack to a place where he knew many fat rabbits came to find dinner. Soon enough, Puss had caught a plump brown rabbit in his sack. He carried his catch straight to the castle and asked to see the king himself. When he was brought before the king, Puss bowed low and offered the king the nice fat rabbit, saying, "Sire, please accept this gift from my master, the Duke of Carabas," for that is the name he had chosen for his master. "Thank your master for me," answered the king. Several days later, the cat returned and gave the king a pair of white doves, and a few days later he brought a dozen quail eggs. Each time he presented his gifts, Puss told the king that the presents were from the Duke of Carabas. After several weeks of this, the cat learned that the king and his daughter would be riding along the riverside. Puss went to his master and told him to take off his shirt and breeches and stand in the river near the bridge at noon the next day. Trusting the cat, his master did as he was asked. At noon, as the king's carriage crossed the bridge, Puss cried out, "Help! My master, the Duke Carabas, is drowning!" The king knew the cat and the name of the Duke well enough, and he ordered his guards to save the man. Puss told the king that his master's clothes had been stolen, so the king sent for an extra suit of his own clothes. The Duke looked quite handsome in the fine clothes. The king's daughter, who was very beautiful, told him so. The king invited the Duke to ride with them, and the cat ran ahead of the royal coach, quite pleased with himself. Puss ordered every farmer and worker he met on the road, "You must tell the king that the land you work on belongs to the Duke of Carabas. If you do not, the ogre who lives in the far castle will chop you into tiny pieces." When the king stopped to ask whose land he crossed, he heard, "The Duke of Carabas," no matter how far he went. "You certainly have a lot of land," the king said to the Duke. The princess smiled at him, and the new Duke smiled back, not having the least idea what was happening. He was thinking how beautiful the princess was. At last, Puss came to the great castle, which really did belong to the ogre, and so did all the lands they had passed through. Puss knew all about the ogre and went right into the castle and asked to see him. Soon enough, the cat was brought before the ogre. "It is said that you can take the shape of any animal you choose," said Puss to the ogre. "That you can, if you wish, turn yourself into a lion." "True enough," said the ogre proudly, and he did just that. The cat, seeing a fierce lion suddenly appear, was so frightened that he jumped on a tall cupboard, but his boots slipped out from under him, and he slid right back down. The ogre had turned back into an ogre again. Puss admitted he had been quite frightened and complimented the ogre on his skill. "People also say that you can change yourself into the tiniest of creatures," said Puss, "but that is impossible. Surely you cannot change into a mouse." "Impossible?" cried the ogre. "Watch this," and he changed himself into a mouse right then and there. Well, of course, Puss, being a cat, gobbled him up in one bite. Just then the king's carriage arrived at the castle. Puss ran to meet it, saying, "Welcome, sire, to the castle of the Duke of Carabas." "Why, is this your castle, my friend?" the king asked the Duke. "May we come in?" The Duke only smiled and turned to help the princess out of the carriage, and the cat's orders, the ogre's servants gave the guests a wonderful meal. While they ate, it was decided that the princess should marry the rich Duke of Carabas right away, since it was plain that the two were in love. As for Puss in Boots, he became a great lord and never had to hunt for mice again, except sometimes for fun. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please click like and subscribe.